Yeah.
Hi everyone, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so kindly for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books in the Park. My name is Car Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple, and tonight I am very happy to welcome you to welcome back actually Ilana DeBare as we celebrate her latest novel, Shaken Free. Let's give a hand for Ilana. Yay. Thank you so kindly. She is joined tonight by Audrey Ferber. Let's give a hand for Audrey as well. Fabulous. Thank you all so much for being here. Was anyone here for the first novel?
A lot of them were.
Some return fans here. Thank you for showing up. And if you're showing up this time, thank you so kindly. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining us both here in person and online. Hello, online audience, and wave to a camera if you can't see. We are broadcasting from San Francisco, California. We open each of our events with a land acknowledgement, and as such, I would like to let you know that we are operating on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land. We think that acknowledgement requires action, and so we encourage you to donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. We have details about the Ramaytush Ohlone Land Trust at the back desk if you are interested in how to do such things. While I'm thinking about it, this front row is empty. If anyone wants to sit very close in the front row view, it's okay. I'm not going to call on you unless you have a question. Very brief business before we get to the heart of the matter. Now is a good time to silence your cell phones. It's the first thing on my list. If you have not already, I've been told that photo taking is quite all right for both of our authors. We just ask that you not take a call in the middle of the event. The addendum is that you have to take good photos of our authors. We're not allowed to take bad photos of our authors. Please do check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us, including the event you are currently attending. If you are able, please do buy books. We have books available. We have both of the DeBare books available this evening at the front register. You can find them there. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. Thank you so kindly. And I'll let you know now, too, remind you rather, that we do have some refreshments that Ilana graciously brought for us to enjoy and imbibe. Please do take advantage of those. Is it safe to say you don't want to bring any?
I do not want to bring 28 cupcakes home. It would be very wrong.
So we need to lend a hand and eat some cupcakes. It's our duty as literary citizens to eat these cupcakes, so thank you. It's also our duty to take advantage of the selfie station in the back, which is themed to Shaken Free here, and I really encourage you to, there's props. Maybe don't do it during the book event. Let's do it after, now that we've gotten things rolling, but it'll be very fun. So let me know if you have any questions regarding that. I'm happy to take a photo for you as well. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two writers who are joining us tonight. First, Audrey Ferber's essays and stories have appeared in the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, Lilith Magazine, New World Writing, Best Women's Travel Writing, and other publications. She is at work on a memoir and essays about caretaking and marriage. Audrey lives in San Francisco. Let's give one more hand for Audrey Ferber. Thank you. And last but most certainly not least, Ilana DeBare is the author of the fantasy novel Shaken Loose from Hypatia Press. A former business reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle, Ilana also worked as communications director at Golden Gate Bird Alliance and was co-founder of the Julia Morgan School for Girls in Oakland. She lives in beautiful Oakland, California, and the sequel to Shaken Loose, Shaken Free, is the reason we are here tonight. Let's give one more hand for Ilana DeBare.
So, thank you all for coming tonight. I wanted to thank all of you, but a couple of other people who especially need thanks here, besides Audrey, who is my buddy in the microphone world tonight. I wanted to thank Lindsay Crittenden, who's also in my writing group. Both Audrey and Lindsay are in my writing group, and they are the reason that I have become a much better writer over the past decade or two. I mean, I have learned so much from them. And Lindsay's also read earlier versions of the book and offered critiques. And I wanted to thank Carr and Green Apple, who are just the best hosts for writers. They are so organized, so supportive. They make it easy, they make it fun. So thank you for building writer and reader community. And I wanted to thank the roadie who hold all the stuff over here tonight. His name is Sam, and he's been my roadie for now 35 years. And he's good for other things too. So I'm going to read a section in the middle of the book. So a little bit of background. Shaken Loose, the first book, involved a young Bay Area woman who died and found herself unexpectedly in hell. Classic Christian hell, fire and devils. It was a terribly unjust place filled with truly bad guys and anyone from throughout history who was not a Christian. And it was also starting to fall apart, which gave her and a few of the other souls in hell a chance to try and escape. And in this book, in the sequel, Annie at this point is back at home in her parents' house in Mill Valley. And for reasons that I don't need to go into, she calls on Satan in prayers or in pleading to him because she has some things that she is struggling with. And the person who shows up is a preteen girl devil named Baphomet, who she knew previously when she was down in hell. Baphomet is sort of your classic preteen. She also is terribly, hopelessly in love with Satan, who does not give her the time of day. So she's thrilled to be sent on this mission to bring Annie back to hell. And Annie didn't think she would be, she just wanted to talk to Satan. She didn't want to go back to hell, but Baphomet's under orders to bring her back. Annie tries to stall her. And, I can't go right away. Will you give me a week? Will you give me, some time? And she ends up convincing Baphomet to spend a day on Earth. It's Baphomet's first trip to Earth. It's a very difficult journey. Only the really seasoned devils get to do it. But Annie has just convinced her to wait 24 hours before taking her back to hell. And Baphomet agrees. "Be here when night returns," Baphomet ordered, trying to deepen her voice to sound as menacing as the senior devils. "If you're not, I'll find you. I can find you anywhere." She turned to the window where she'd entered. Already the black sky was giving way to streaks of rose and orange. She hunched to lift off. "Wait!" The Annie human gestured her to halt. "You can't just fly around out there looking like that. People will go nuts. They'll call out the police or the army." And the way devils look, they're this color of tarnished silver. They're sort of black and silver and green and brown, and they have leathery wings. I mean, they definitely would stand out. "They'll call out the police or the army." "So? They'll try to capture you. They have weapons. Even if you're immortal, it'll make a big mess." Human souls in hell were powerless, pathetic things. And Annie's living form didn't seem like much of a threat either. Still, she had a point. Satan's ancient visits to Earth had always been discreet. She didn't want to disgrace herself. "What do you suggest, then?" Annie frowned. "I could lend you clothes. Maybe you could tuck your wings inside a jacket. We could fix your skin with makeup, but that would look weird. Wait, can't you shapeshift?" "What do you mean?" "Take on a different form. Didn't Satan become a serpent in the Garden of Eden? Doesn't he take on a human appearance when he comes to Earth?" Again, Annie had a point. It had been so long since Satan or any of his aides had been to Earth that Baphomet had forgotten about assuming human form. She knew it could be done, but she'd never seen anyone do it. "I don't know how." The admission felt shameful. "Maybe you should just wait here then." No. This might be her one chance in all of eternity to see Earth. If she'd managed the crossing, she could manage this. Baphomet turned away from Annie and concentrated. How did Satan and the more powerful devils do things? Flying came naturally to her. She had flown as long as she could remember. But there were other kinds of power. Satan touching her forehead to pass on Annie's location. Devil's ability to hear human prayers. There were never any special tools or totems, just concentration. So she quieted her mind and focused every part of herself on becoming a human like Annie. Wings falling away, talons into toenails, skin blanched and roughened, pocked with bumps and hairs and wrinkles. There! She looked at her hands and they were pink. Horrible! Legs pink, too. She reached behind her back, and the space where her wings should be felt empty and vulnerable. She was grateful that Satan couldn't see her like this. Annie stared, stunned. That was satisfying enough to make up for the awful transformation. Well, Baphomet said, now you can give me some of your clothes. She couldn't fly. She had to walk. Annie had ushered Baphomet out of the house and pointed her in the direction of town. Red and orange streaked the sky just above the horizon, while the upper regions melted from black into a deep blue. Trees lined her path, not the symmetrical gold and silver trees she'd known in heaven, but unruly, massive trees of green and brown with branches fighting each other every which way. Walking was slower than flying, but it allowed more time to experience things. The sponginess of the ground alongside her path, the piles of damp leaves with a soft, multi-layered smell that seemed to curl in on itself. Was this what humans meant by rot? And so much water. It was everywhere. She'd realized that that was what made the air feel thick, but it was also inside the tree trunks and the dead leaves. It pooled and trickled below the straight, hard path. It beaded on the glossy metal roofs of the wheeled vehicles resting along the path. If heaven was the realm of God, and hell was the realm of fire, then earth was surely the realm of water. The orange streaks had vanished, and the sky was now a pure light blue. The sun formed a brilliant orb, white as the light of heaven. This place was brighter than hell, and more richly colored than heaven. Baphomet might not be able to fly, but she gave a little skip. The human world was coming awake, and cars darted past, stopping abruptly at a red sign and then lunging forward. A human woman approached her, running at a moderate pace, a blank look on her face, thin cords hanging from her ears. Baphomet tensed for some kind of reaction, the going nuts that Annie had feared, but the woman simply kept running, and she realized with glee that her transformation was successful. She gave another little skip. Annie's shoes had some kind of lightweight cushion in them that made you bounce. It was fun, but nothing like flying. Poor, frail humans. She skipped again and saw a crack in the path where tree roots were pushing their way up, so she hopped over that with her right foot, and then saw another spot where the path had chipped away, so she hopped over that with her left foot, and skipping and hopscotching, she made her way into downtown Mill Valley. It was a small place, a fraction of the size of Beelzebub City, far less grand than Satan's palace. No gold, no bronze, no visible gemstones. But it was far more colorful. A yellow building sat beside a deep brown one, which in turn sat beside a grayish blue one. They all had brightly colored signs, some with images and some with letters. And for the first time in her millennia-long existence, Baphomet wondered what it would be like to know how to read. Why had God given writing to humans and not to his own angels? If Satan's forces had known how to write and read, might the rebellion have triumphed? At first, the squiggles and lines on the signs fascinated her, but then they started to make her angry. They felt like Satan's meetings with his aides back at home. Important things were taking place behind closed doors, and she was stuck outside. Nasty signs, nasty feeling of being left out. Baphomet wanted to fly up, rip a sign away, and drop it off a cliff, watch it shatter. But she had no wings. So instead, she picked up a small stone lying near the trunk of a tree and hurled it at the writing on one of the windows near her path. She might have the flimsy-looking body of a human girl, but her arms still had the strength of a devil. The window shattered with a crash. Shards of glass flew everywhere. An unnatural screech pierced the air and started to repeat itself over and over. What had she done? Baphomet glanced around, terrified, and took off running down the street, around a corner, down an alley, as far and as fast as her now human legs could go. She crouched behind bushes, heart pounding. Wait, Don't move. Be sure no one has followed you." Gradually, she calmed down. There seemed to be no police, no army, no humans going nuts. The street was quiet, the patch of grass around the bushes deserted. After a long time, she ventured out of her hiding spot and back down the alley to the main street. A human man was hammering flat pieces of wood over the broken window. Otherwise, everything seemed quiet and unchanged. She made sure to stay far away from the window and picked her way down the street. For the rest of the day, she kept a tight rein on herself. No show of force, nothing abrupt or noisy that might attract people's attention. She stared at the ground and let herself sag down inside Annie's large jacket whenever a human approached. And amazingly, no one seemed to notice her. At one point, she went into a building that sold food. Annie had given her green pieces of paper to exchange for such things. A group of human girls clustered in front of a glass counter, chattering and pointing at vats of different colors. Yes, more colors. This place was overflowing with colors. She followed their example, and the human behind the counter scooped 2 small spheres, one pink, the other brown and white, into a dish for her. They looked like the consistency of congealing lava, but once he handed her the dish, she realized they were cold, almost as cold as the winds of the crossing. She took the dish outside and sat alone on a bench. The human girls were gathered around a table, eating and giggling. Foolish humans. How could they be so happy when they had only a few score years of life, when cells in their bodies were dying every minute? She felt contemptuous of them, but also a little lonely. So she started picturing them in the fire. That girl with long red hair. Ha! See how that hair will look when it's red with unquenchable flames? Or the girl with the sack filled with books on her back. Feel that sack in the fire, dragging you down, dragging you under. Baphomet poked at her food with a small, scoop-like tool she'd been given and cautiously tasted it. Her mouth exploded. Ice! Snow! Frozen! Freezing! She'd only heard these words, never experienced them, but she instinctively knew that this was what she was feeling. Take the cold winds of the crossing and concentrate them. Mine them for their essence like ore from rock, and this is what you'd get. Her tongue tingled, her lips numbed, and then all that cold was knocked aside by the taste. Sweetness, smoothness. The sweetness sprinted to the corners of her mouth, leaping up and down. Sweet as fresh grass, warm breeze, earth sun. Smooth as new petals, as angel skin. It started out thick and mucousy, but almost before you could notice, it melted away and left you wanting more. She took another bite and another. By the time she paused to let her mouth warm up, the girls had left. The sun was lower in the sky, almost hidden behind the trees and the buildings. A creature sat before her. An animal, 4-legged and shaggy, smaller than one of her wings. It stared up at her with large brown eyes that seemed too big for its head. Baphomet surmised that it was a dog or a cat. The only animals she'd ever seen were the winged horses of heaven and hell. It wanted something from her, and Baphomet realized those big eyes were not in fact staring at her, but at her dish. Without thinking, she dipped her tool and reached it out. The animal stretched towards her, and with one curl of a long pink tongue, took all the ice cream. It licked its lips and smiled at her. She offered a second glob, and it ate that one too. She took another mouthful herself and felt torn. The ice cream was so good, but it was also delightful to watch the animal enjoying itself. She took one big final taste and then put the rest of the dish on the ground. When the animal had lapped it all up, she reached out a hand and it licked that too. Its tongue was rougher than her own. Sand come to life. She reached into the thick tangle of its fur and felt the small, pulsing body underneath. Those big eyes stared up at her. Could you take an animal through the crossing? Quincy! A human woman strode down the path, holding a cord. There you are, bad dog. She turned to Baphomet. I'm sorry. Was he bothering you? He's quite the beggar. No, he wasn't bothering me. Quincy, come! The dog bounded away from Baphomet without a glance back, and the woman fastened the cord to a collar around his neck. She smiled at Baphomet, told her to have a good day, and walked off. A good day. The sun was well below the trees and roof lines now. Baphomet thought it would be supremely frustrating to have time broken up like this. You'd barely begin an activity when the day would end and you'd have to stop. It would be a constant on and off, start and stop. How did humans get anything done? On the other hand, it offered constant new beginnings. Have a good day. If today wasn't good, you could just wait until the next day, and that might be better. Time to fetch Annie. Baphomet turned off the main street, back onto the smaller road towards Annie's house. Leaves still dotted the ground, but they were different from this morning. Drier, more dispersed, crackling when you stepped on them. Everything on Earth seemed to be constantly changing. The sun, the leaves, even the melting ice cream. Satan had wooed her away from heaven with promises of change, but nothing in hell ever seemed to really change. Ahead of her, a group of human males leaned against a fence, talking and laughing. They were drinking something out of a bag. She briefly wondered if she should cross to the other side of the street, but decided it wasn't necessary. So far, none of the humans had paid her the least notice. "Hey, new girl!" They were calling to her, but she didn't know how to respond. "You just move here? Where are you from?" Several of them were calling. They moved off the fence as one, a swarm, and into the center of the path. "You at Tam High? Where are you going?" She froze. They had no swords or flaming arrows, but there was menace here. "Aw, come on, tell us your name. Cute girl like you, want a party?" She understood there were words that would defuse the menace, but she had no idea what they were. Be careful. Not like earlier with that rock. Don't call attention. "What's the matter? Too good to talk to us? Hey, baby, let's party." They tightened ranks in the middle of the path. She tried to veer into the street, but they outflanked her and moved in close. One of them made little sucking sounds with his lips. "Nice ass. Hey, baby, give us a kiss." One of them reached towards her. She pushed him away, trying not to use more force than a human girl, but he still went flying across the path. "What the fuck? Stupid bitch!" They crowded in, faces distorted with anger, hands grabbing, torsos pushing. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Fear mixed with rage. "Don't touch me. How dare you, stupid humans, stupid mortals." Without thinking, she jerked her consciousness into itself and transformed into the creature that had been the nemesis of humans since the Garden of Eden. Writhing body as thick and legless as a tree trunk, long as 3 cars, eyes blazing like rubies, and fanged mouth wide enough to swallow any of their heads. Baphomet coiled and reared and hissed down at them. Now they were properly small and puny, and she was queen of the fallen angels, Satan's chosen, Satan's beloved. "Never touch me," she hissed, as the boys fell and scrambled and scattered, terrified, into driveways and gardens.
Wow, that was wonderful. One thing that really amuses me is later we find out that the devil, who has no interest in Baphomet at all, calls her Bath Mat. It's kind of really like a real zinger to her every time he says it, because he just doesn't see her. He doesn't see that she loves him.
I think we've all been there.
Although I've never been called Bath Mat. So how did a nice Jewish girl like you end up in Christian hell? What impels you? What compels you? What brought you to this material?
So I originally started with an idea of what would it be like if everything I knew about the world was wrong. And being a secular, science-oriented person, that sort of turned into, what if the fundamentalists are right? I mean, that was like the most opposite of anything I could think of. What if science was wrong? What if gravity was wrong? What if evolution was wrong? What if there was an afterlife and it wasn't just for good people of any kind? What if it was an afterlife and it was only for Christians? And if I, as a Jewish person, no matter how good I was going to hell. And Gandhi was in hell and Einstein was in hell. I mean, it was like the total opposite of how I conceived the world working. And so I that was really what started me with it. And the basic idea of what if you woke up one day and everything you knew about the world was wrong? How would you react? How would you just cope with that? And then I'd been working on this for a couple of years, and we came to November 2016, and I woke up and I realized that I didn't need to write about hell. I think we all woke up that morning and realized that everything we had assumed about the world was wrong.
Yeah, and you say in a post in your blog, Ilana has a wonderful blog called Two Pockets, and you say that you had mixed feelings about releasing this dystopic vision in a time when things are so dystopic. What were you thinking about that?
So the first book came out 2 years ago, and we were in the middle of the Biden administration, and I started working on this like in 2014, I think 2013. It was the Obama era, and writing about dystopia was this. It was like writing about science fiction set in the 28th century. It's like so distant from reality that it's like this fun thing. Let's imagine if there's a plague that destroys the world. Let's imagine if there's a Handmaid's Tale type thing. And that was fine. And what I found when we got into Trump 1 was it was actually a pleasant relief for me to go into writing about hell. It was, yes, it was an escape from reading the news headlines, but it was also two things. One, as a writer, I had control over what was happening, and I felt like, and I still feel like that now. I have, as an individual, I wish I had control. I feel like I have so little control, but when I'm writing the book, I have power and control. And also, even in this hell, my characters behave well. I mean, they have good intentions. They screw up. There's some bad guys, but the main ones are trying their hardest, and they're making connections with each other across huge barriers. In the first book, Annie's closest ally is a Hun horseman from the 4th century on the edge of the Roman Empire. And they're making connections, they're working together, and all of that, I think, is a really positive antidote to what we see in the world around us right now.
Yeah. I mean, also in terms of character development and growth, the extremity of the horrors that they face in hell, I think, was very fertile for watching the characters grow and change. I'm thinking of Trua, who's a wonderful character who later becomes a love interest for Annie. And he comes from a tribal background where everything's just about tribal loyalty. Tell us a little bit about his growth.
Yeah, so Trua is the Hun who becomes her ally and then a love interest. And when I first created him writing the story, I just thought of him as an opponent. She's in hell, and this guy attacks her. And it was just, here's an enemy to overcome. And then as I wrote him, the story evolved that he became more of an enemy, but he was still kind of a secondary, he was a foil for Annie. He went from somebody who she saw as a threat to someone she saw as an ally to someone she really trusted, but it was still always, she was the main character and he was somebody who was kind of helping her along her personal growth and journey. And by the time I finished the second book, he had his own growth and arc also, and he really had his own evolution in his own right, and I love him now. He's really, I think when you read the book and you see how he develops, he goes through so much, and he really changes. And one of the things that I realized, the thing about writing a novel is you write it, and as you go along, what I found was I realized things about the book that I didn't know while I was writing it. Once it's done, I go back and I look at it and I say, oh, wow. And one of those was the good guys in the book are the people who change in hell, and the bad guys are the people who don't change and are stuck and are doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, stuck is a good word for the contrast. I admire the great restraint with which you wrote their love story. So Annie goes through some really heavy stuff to get back to hell. And it's an incredible decision because she has a beautiful little baby. And she gets there and she's really anxious to see Trua. And he looks at her and he goes, "What are you doing here?" And then for, I don't know, 100 more pages, maybe hundreds, plural more pages, he's cold to her. He's not interested in her. I thought that was a really interesting decision, and it fought against what could have been very sappy. And it felt so modern and so true, the way Annie was with him. And then at the very end, she has that long speech where she goes, "Oh, I'm going to get tired of him. He's going to be too dependent on me. He doesn't know anyone on earth." He agrees, he comes back with her. It looks like it's going well, but there's always this ambivalence. What were you thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily believe in happy ever after. I mean, I believe in happy, I believe in being together, I believe in loving each other, but I think there's always, I mean, especially if you have somebody who's from 21st century Bay Area and someone who's from the 4th century, Hungarian plains, there are going to be some issues.
Yeah, it's a tough match.
But I also felt like when they do see each other again in hell, this is in the second book, they both have really different expectations and what they've been through. And Annie has been sort of romanticizing him, and just you're away from somebody for that long and you have no contact, and you think of this wonderful, joyful reunion that you're going to have. And he's done some things that he's ashamed of, and he doesn't want her to know. And he also wanted her to stay on Earth and have a life. He doesn't want to see her back in hell. And so, yeah, there are some mixed signals happening there.
Yeah. Another thing that makes this book incredibly readable for me, and it was the first book as well, is that there are multiple points of view. And they're very short chapters, which I, for some reason, really enjoy. It sort of mimics the feeling of action. There's a lot of action in this book. But I loved getting to know the characters. Maybe my favorite is Haisheng. And Haisheng, remind me what year he
died in 1927. He was a Chinese student in Shanghai, a university student who got involved with the revolution then, and the communists were trying to overthrow the traditional order. And he died in a massacre by the conservative political forces and the gangs. And this was actually the novel Man's Fate by Andre Malraux is about this failed uprising. And it's a book that I loved in my early 20s. And I know there's been a lot of criticism of Malraux for writing, sort of as a European outsider of the Chinese experience and, a lot of that. But it was still, for me, it was this fascinating portrait of people in a revolution and the decisions and the pressures on them. And so there was a character in there who's the hero who gets killed at the end. And when I read it in my 20s, I really didn't want him to get killed. It was like, no, don't end the book this way. And so Haisheng is not at all like that character. They are very, very different. But it's the same milieu, and I sort of created him because I wanted to not have that character die, which is kind of weird. But
I loved Malraux in my 20s too. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
But let me just read a few little things that Haisheng says that are so interesting. So he meets the wraiths, And he says, the wraiths were the proletariat of hell. Organize them and you would overthrow the devils. Hell could become a utopia, humans and wraiths united, building a new and just society. And then later he says, Christian heaven was like communism. No wage labor, no private property, people working for their own fulfillment and the common good. So the book, we're finding out, we're learning about hell and eventually heaven, but we do it through the lens, very, very particular lens of these individual characters, which is so interesting to me. And then we have Kezia. Kezia is an interesting woman. She's an African-American woman from the present time. She's from Brooklyn. And she's very, very anxious to reunite with her husband, George. But the other part...
Who died, and she wants to find him in heaven.
She wants to find him in heaven. But the other part of her growth and her change as a character is she has a son named Jeremiah. And she was rejecting of him because he was gay. And so she comes to understand. It was very moving.
Yeah.
And she wishes she's able to do it over. Very, very moving. So we experience heaven and hell, but through these very, very particular lenses that are so interesting. You did something funny. It was about God.
Hilarious.
Yeah, it was hilarious. Actually, I wondered, did you read the Bible before you started? Was that part of your work?
I'm pretty familiar with Torah. I did read Christian Gospels, which I had never really read before when I was working on this. But the most informative book in terms of creating the world was Paradise Lost by John Milton. And in terms of creating hell, the whole cosmology of the devils rebelling against God and being thrown down to earth and then organizing with Satan down there and then coming back, that's all, the backstory is all Paradise Lost. But in terms of describing the torments of hell, there was James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, where he has a section with the priests at the school teaching the young boys, including the character who's kind of a surrogate for Joyce, with this terrible, terrible sermon that goes on for pages and pages about the torments of hell if they sin at all. And that's really graphic. And then Jonathan Edwards, the Puritan American preacher, has some equally really, really graphic, horrible descriptions that you are just a spider hanging over a fire, and it's only God who's keeping you from falling into the flames of the fire. And so that, in terms of creating hell, those were really formative for me.
One more thing that jumped out at me. For a second, I thought you had made a mistake, but I know you too well to know that you would have made a mistake. So on page 304.
Uh-oh, I'm worried.
So we're in Kezia's point of view. And Kezia, they're up in heaven, and one of my favorite characters to emerge, Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ appears, and Kezia says, there, walking serenely down the steps into the courtyard, was a tall, tobacco-skinned man with wavy hair down to his shoulders, a trim beard, and a beige tunic, belted with a dark brown cord. And then on the very next page, we're in Annie's voice. There's barely two sentences between this. And then Annie says, Annie knew it could only be Jesus. He looked like every greeting card, picture book image of him she'd ever seen. Skin pale as a white peach, blue eyes, and long straight hair. I thought that was so clever.
Yeah.
And so important to this whole story of us seeing what we want to see, seeing what we already believe. Although there are some really very moving changes in belief by the end of this book that moved me and surprised me and shocked me.
Yeah, no, I'm that is definitely the people seeing what they wanted to see. There is something I was hoping to get at. Also, when they are in heaven, you'll notice that there are constant descriptions of what the air smells like, and they're very different depending on who is smelling it.
Yeah, right.
So at one point it smells like roast chicken to one character, and it smells like cherry blossoms to another character, and
one more thing, actually, I don't want to leave out is there's a wonderful amount of family dynamics in here that I really, really enjoyed. Knowing Ilana's writing very well, there's almost always, in everything she writes, a really brainy older brother who overwhelms a sister who's not the lesser child in the family. And he appears here, of course, and he's a wonderfully filled out character. I've been reading him for years in many different places, but this is the first time I really saw him grow and change. So he starts out really arrogant, and he doesn't shut up, and he knows more about everything than anyone else in the room. And he, of course, doesn't believe Annie when she tells him she's been to hell. And he just wants her to be in therapy and maybe be institutionalized if she's not able to move forward. But somehow he ends up going there with her. And it's very moving to see it takes us to the end of the book, but we see the power dynamic change between them. And I love his relationship with Baphomet. I thought Baphomet ended up as his girlfriend, but you kept describing her as a girl. So do they end up,
well, I'm not going to say how anything ends up.
Okay.
No, not saying how anything ends up.
So, but one thing that's adorable is he sort of woos Baphomet by teaching her to read and introducing her to homophones. And she sort of becomes obsessed with homophones, and she finds them everywhere. So, yeah, I love the family dynamic part of the book.
So, thinking about what you were saying about her brother not believing she'd been to hell, that was, like I went into the first book with the question of what would it be like if everything I knew about the world was wrong? And the question that really drove me when I started this second book was, what would it be like to come back from hell and reemerge into your normal life? And kind of like what happens to Dorothy after she comes back from Oz? I mean, she goes to school and she tells her friends, oh, my friend the Scarecrow, and then you can tell she's the butt of everybody's jokes for the rest of the year. And I spent a lot of time I was so fascinated I wrote a lot of scenes that did not end up in the book because it would have been too long and probably kind of redundant, but just Annie trying to make sense of her life after she'd had this experience. I have one scene that didn't get into the book where she goes on a blind date that her mother sets her up with this guy, and they're, in a bar eating dinner, and they're just talking casually, but she somehow has to tell him about hell. And you can tell that date does not go very well.
Swipe left.
Yeah. So that was really, I drove me a lot when I was getting started in this, and then of course it evolved.
Well, thank you. I must say that Ilana and I have been in writing groups together for many years, and she's always been an inspiration for me. We would give her copious notes, and she would make the revisions maybe the same day, or by the next day she had revised, and I think these books are a wonderful accomplishment. Very happy to be part of this whole thing.
Well, I am just so appreciative of you, Lindsay, the other women who've been in our group, because I have learned so much. Yeah.
Should we take some questions?
Sure.
Anybody have some?
Yes.
I have a question. You sort of touched on this when you talked about how the good characters, become better people. And that really struck me, being someone who's been, born and bred, so to speak, as an Episcopalian, a practicing Christian. Then the theme of sort of redemption, and you're coming to this book from agnostic, if not atheist, point of view, but there is still somehow something that transforms these characters and makes them better, and that there's something very redemptive that very much comes out of the Judeo-Christian tradition. And I guess I'm just curious to hear you speak a little bit more about maybe how writing about hell and this second book, heaven, trying to go into the mind of Jesus and having to say things, how that influenced your own sense of spirituality, if at all.
That's a good question. I don't know if it changed my own spirituality. I think I thought a lot more about other people's spirituality. I mean, certainly Keziah, the middle-aged, widowed Black woman.
She's very devout.
She's very, very devout. And so I had to put a lot of thought into taking that point of view seriously, which is not something that I grew up with and not something I normally think through. So I did learn a lot, I think, in terms of my own spirituality. I don't know if it changed. I think I didn't set out with any of the characters with a plan in my mind, like, okay, they're going to start here and they're going to end up here. And I have a lot of trouble thinking in terms of epiphanies because it's hard for me to think abstractly without having it seem cliched. Like, oh, their friend is going to die and they're going to learn the value of friendship. I mean, that just feels, but what happened was as I was writing and they went through these experiences, it just seemed logical to me the way they responded, given who they are, that they would change. And there are a couple of evil characters in the first book. There are some very selfish and self-centered devils in the second book. I don't think they're actually less evil than the evil human souls in the first book. But of the ones who I followed and who I really get into the point of view, I didn't spend time focusing on people who were evil or who were really bad, who weren't changing, who were really, everybody was flawed and everybody was learning. I think that was, if there's something that I believe coming out of it, I believe that everybody is flawed and everybody can learn and get better. Up here, yes.
I really didn't mean to intend to sit here and listen, and I've never heard of this book before, but it's interesting and the food is good.
Oh, well, thank you on both counts. And you've never heard of it before because it came out yesterday. It didn't even exist until yesterday.
Well, actually, this book came out yesterday. I was also reading it, and then I put it down because I wanted to listen and be polite, but then it was also interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you're here, and I hope you eat a lot more of the food. What's the book that you're reading that came out?
It's called Chef's Secret.
Is it a series or is it
It's a series. It's the 6th book in the series. If you look down the aisle, it's right there, but that book card was funny.
Okay.
And also, this book is new, and this book is new.
Okay. Well, that's great. This is a really fun place to sit and read too, isn't it?
Keep reading.
Yeah. Keep reading and keep eating. And then we'll take, afterwards we can take a photo of you with the angel or devil costume if you want.
Oh, cool. Can I have it with a cupcake with whipped cream on top?
You do whatever you want. You can put the whipped cream on the potato chips if you want. All right, another question. Yes.
Is there going to be a book 3?
No, there is not a book 3. This is really the end. And when I was working on book 1, I knew there needed to be another book because it was not resolved. And I thought for a while, can I do a trilogy? Because it would be so nice because Dante had a trilogy and, you could have hell and purgatory and heaven. And it would have been really nice. And I just didn't have 3 books. The story was just 2 books.
Okay.
So this is it, no more. And the next book I'm writing is completely different.
Oh, but there is
Oh
a
my
next book.
god, Kate.
There is a
Yes.
next book. Tell us about
So the next book,
Oh no.
it's a historical novel set in the 1600s in the Jewish communities of Europe, and during a time when there was a false Messiah. And there was a rabbi in Turkey who he and his followers declared him the Messiah, and the whole Jewish world believed it. And there was this ferment that everybody thought the messianic end was coming. People were selling their businesses. They were, planning to pack up their homes and move to Jerusalem to be part of the new messianic kingdom. And the Turkish Sultan, like rulers everywhere, was threatened by the idea of a Messiah. So they arrested him and they gave him a choice. You can convert to Islam or we'll kill you. So he converted to Islam, which was a crushing disappointment to these hundreds of thousands of followers all around Europe. So that's not my story, but that's the background for the story.
Wow.
And I've been researching that for about 4 or 5 years, and I'm almost through a first draft now.
Wow. Great.
So very different. More questions? The roadie has a question.
So in book one of the best characters is Satan. And you write a lot about Satan, but in book 2, of course, we're going to meet Jesus. Talk a little bit about what it was like to write about Jesus, which I imagine would be, in some ways, a lot more daunting than writing about Satan.
Well, Satan is certainly more fun because, he's a more fun character. You can be much more humorous with Satan than you can be with Jesus. Although, I can get a little bit of humor in with Jesus. But Jesus was daunting because I'm Jewish. And I had a lot of, dare I do this? Am I going to screw it up? Will there be pogroms if I do this? Do I have the cultural background? And I think I did it. Lindsay can tell me if she thinks it turned out okay. But in creating Jesus, I drew a lot on his Jewish roots. And there's a book by a Christian scholar called Rabbi Jesus, which is a really well done study of what the milieu that Jesus grew up and lived in was like, and the Jewish world that he was part of, and the traditions and the rituals and the beliefs that sort of helped shape him. And that was very helpful to me. And so, using that as a base to understand what his experience living on Earth during that time was like, was really helpful, and I think gave me an in to connect with him a little bit. But it's always more fun to write the really bad guys. I mean, if they're not the really evil guys, but Satan is a bad guy who's a funny bad guy.
Well, and also in Paradise Lost, Satan
Yes.
is definitely the most charismatic character.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Good. Okay, one more question. Or half a question. Or maybe we will not have a question and we will go straight. Oh, we have okay.
So if you're doing a lot of research, because it's it's fascinating to do. You can do research. So when do you stop yourself doing research and actually start writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was at the Community of Writers last summer. Used to be known as Squaw Valley Community of Writers, and there was a writer who gave a wonderful talk on that based on an article, and I can find it for you and send it via Audrey. But that's a good question because I think he called it research rapture, and it's like falling into drug addiction that you can't you get going and you can't stop and you just have to do a little bit more. And it's really easy when you're having trouble I mean, you always have trouble writing. You get to a point you don't know what's going to happen with your characters. You don't know what you don't like what you just did, or you don't have an idea. And when that happens, it's really easy to go into research as an escape from the plot issues that you're dealing with. And to say, well, I can't keep going until I find out everything about how they disposed of vegetable peels in the 7th century.
Right.
So,
I've been there.
yeah. So one way I knew when to stop researching was when I started knowing everything that the experts I talked to referred me to. Like there was a point where I was interviewing some people who were professors in the areas that I was looking at, and they'd say, oh, well, have you read this? And have you read that? And it turned out I had read everything that they had suggested. And that was, okay, I think I know this field. And then what's happening now, at a certain point in the book, I realized I was just using research rapture as a delaying tactic. And I've started, when I write and I get to something I don't know, I just highlight it in yellow and I keep going and I say, I'll come back and I'll find out about those 7th century banana peels later. So it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge with all historical fiction because you could just keep going forever and ever. And the stacks of the Doe Gardner Library at UC are my happy place. I could wander there for a long time. So I think it's time to stop the questions. And you guys really do need to eat cake. And you really do need to take selfies. And I would love it if you take a selfie. You can take selfies just with the props, but if you take one with the book, post it on social media. You could take some with the book, without the book, with your friends. You can have devils and angels fighting. You can look holy. You can look sinful. Just go for it.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Can we give one more hand for Ilana DeBare?
And, if you buy books, I'll be happy to sign them. Car will tell me where to go and do that.
Yes,
Yes.
I will. That's, as a matter of fact, why I'm here. Thank you. Yes, you all heard the note about food and beverage. So please take heed. Any open bottles, it is your homework to finish them. Anything open, we have to finish it. Books are available at the front register. You can find them there. I'm going to have Ilana signing right here where you are now, and you can use that table as a surface to sign. I'll grab a couple pens for you should you need. If you have any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Thank you so kindly.